The story starts deep in the wilderness, where a father and his young son are out hunting. Out of nowhere, a massive, human-shaped black shadow streaks through the trees. Sensing immediate danger, a wave of panic hits the father. Without wasting a single second, he grabs his son and rushes them up a nearby wooden watchtower. After slamming the heavy door shut and locking it tight, he raises his shotgun, staring intensely into the dark. From the distance, the eerie sound of claws scraping against the wood creeps closer and closer, sending a cold sweat rolling down the father's forehead. In his terror, he doesn't even notice the sound of heavy, hot breathing coming from right behind him. Suddenly, a series of vicious roars echo through the night, followed by the frantic sound of footsteps retreating into the woods. The father lets out a massive sigh of relief, thinking the monster has finally left them alone. But just a short distance from the watchtower, the brutally mauled corpse of another hunter lies in the dirt. Peering back through his telescope, the father catches another glimpse of the terrifying creature. Sensing his dad's breathing growing heavy and erratic, the boy nervously asks what that thing was. Trying to keep his cool, the father reassures him, lying that it was just a bear. However, the moment they return home, the boy overhears his father desperately calling for help on a walkie-talkie. His dad reports seeing definitive tracks of a wolfman, a werewolf-like creature, warning that if this thing isn't put down, every child in the surrounding area is in grave danger. As it turns out, a highly contagious virus known as mountain fever has been tearing through the wildlife in this massive forest. If a human accidentally gets infected, they morph into a bloodthirsty, ruthless humanoid beast, the very creature the local tribes call the wolfman. Flash forward 30 years. Blake, the little boy from the tower, is all grown up. He left his childhood home behind long ago to build a life in the bustling city. Blake is now a dedicated father with a beautiful young daughter, and the two share an incredibly close bond. His wife, Shelley, is a fierce, no-nonsense journalist. Their lives are peaceful and ordinary until the day Blake receives word that his father has passed away. His dad had gone missing in the forest weeks prior, and after days of fruitless searching, the police officially declared him dead. The news hits Blake with a heavy mix of regret and sorrow. His father had been incredibly harsh on him, which is why Blake packed his bags and abandoned the forest home the second he turned 18, never seeing his father again. One evening, after Shelley gets home from work, Blake finally opens up. He explains that he wants to take the family back to his childhood home to sort through his dad's belongings, hoping the trip will double as a peaceful vacation to clear his mind. Shelley is initially ready to turn down the idea due to her grueling work schedule, but realizing it's the perfect opportunity to mend the fractured relationship between Blake and their daughter, she finally gives in. With everything settled, the trio packs into an RV motorhome and hits the road toward the deep woods. As they near their destination, Blake realizes the main road is completely blocked off. At first, he thinks he took a wrong turn, but with zero cell service out in the wilderness, he is forced to pull out an old paper map. Just then, his daughter looks out the window and spots a strange man standing nearby. Seeing a gun in the stranger's hand, Shelley instantly panics, but Blake quickly steps out to introduce himself. To his surprise, he realizes the man is actually his childhood neighbor and old friend. Having not seen each other in decades, they didn't recognize one another at first glance. Upon learning that Blake is heading to his late father's property, the neighbor happily offers to guide them, explaining that the mountain trails have shifted significantly over the years. Spying the beautiful Shelley sitting in the back of the RV, the neighbor's eyes flare with jealousy. Over the years, the mountain community's population had dwindled to almost nothing, making living humans a rare sight, let alone an attractive woman. Blake is still trying to process his friend's strange demeanor when a sudden, terrifying figure darts right into the path of the RV. Swerving violently to avoid it, Blake loses control, and the massive vehicle goes careening down a steep hill. When Blake finally regains consciousness, he realizes the RV is dangling precariously against a tree. Panicking, his neighbor tries to force his way out, but the moment he opens the door, he loses his footing and plummets down the drop. Terrified, Blake yells at his wife and daughter to scramble out through the opposite side. Just as he prepares to climb out himself, he catches a reflection in the mirror. That horrifying creature is closing in. Fearing it will climb up the wreckage, Blake reaches out to slam the door shut, but a massive, clawed hand shatters the window glass, severely gashed his arm. His neighbor is even less fortunate. Before the man can even process what is happening, something violently drags him screaming into the dense, pitch-black jungle. The horrific sight instantly triggers Blake's childhood memories of the Wolfman's stories. Moving fast, he scrambles out the other side of the vehicle, ensures the monster has retreated, and quickly pulls his wife and daughter away, knowing that staying near the crash site is a surefire death sentence. Fortunately, his father's old house isn't too far off. Breaking through the tree line, the old wooden cabin finally comes into view. But just as they make a run for it, the heavy, rapid thumping of footsteps echoes right behind them. The monster is hot on their heels. They dive through the front door, slamming it and locking it just in time. After a few agonizing moments, the commotion outside fades away. Catching his breath, Blake inspects his old home, making absolutely sure every single window and door is secured. Grabbing a flashlight, he heads down into the basement where he finds a small generator. Yanking the cord, the house instantly floods with light, taking the edge off everyone's terror. Blake comforts his daughter, promising her that they will leave the very second the sun comes up. To distract her, the two play their old childhood mind-reading game. Once the little girl finally drifts off to sleep, Blake slips out of the room to further reinforce the barricades. Shelley approaches him, nervously asking what that creature outside really was. The truth is, Blake barely knows himself, guessing it must be a human infected by the virus who turned completely feral. He hauls a heavy wardrobe over, wedging it firmly against the front door. Shelley argues that a simple barricade isn't going to cut it and suggests calling for help, but the dead cell zone makes that impossible. Rummaging through the house, Blake unearths his father's old radio. It powers on, but scanning through the frequencies yields nothing but static. Meanwhile, Shelley discovers a heavy ring of keys inside a wooden box and quietly slides them into her pocket. Suddenly, a foul, putrid odor catches Blake's attention. Following the scent into a storage room, he finds a stash of smoked meat his father had prepared, a childhood favorite of his. But the moment he takes a bite, a sharp, shooting pain flares in his jaw, and as he chews, one of his teeth falls right out into his hand. Blake brushes it off, assuming he must have injured his mouth during the RV crash. Shelley pulls out a first aid kit to tend to him, but as she wraps his wounds, she notices the deep, ragged claw marks tearing across his arm. Blake insists it was just broken glass from the window, but Shelley isn't buying it, her eyes filling with deep worry. Dismissing her concern, Blake goes back to fixing the door, but the noise wakes their daughter. Blake opens his mouth to apologize, but the little girl just stares at him with an eerie, vacant look while his wife stands by in dead silence. A heavy, unsettling feeling settles over Blake. By midnight, a terrifying restlessness consumes his palms, accompanied by a blinding, agonizing pain radiating deep inside his body. Suddenly, a bizarre rustling noise echoes from the upper floor. Fearing the wolfman has breached the roof, Blake tiptoes up the stairs to investigate. The sound grows louder and louder, but when he finally peeks around the corner, he realizes it's just the sound of spiders crawling across the floorboards. A chilling realization hits Blake. His sense of hearing has become unnaturally, superhumanly sharp. Trying to suppress his mounting dread, another sound hits his ears. This time, it's coming from right outside the front door. Believing the wolfman has arrived, he orders Shelley to stay put and creeps over to press his ear against the wood. Without warning, a pair of powerful, monstrous hands burst through, grabbing his legs. Shelley screams in terror, but finding a surge of courage, she grabs a hammer and smashes it down on the beast's hands. Roaring in pain, the wolfman retracts its claws and Blake breaks free. But his condition is rapidly deteriorating. When he finally comes to, his heightened hearing catches Shelley desperately begging for help over the radio, but the terrifying details she is listing send a shiver straight down his spine. Blake can't believe his own ears. He tries to speak to defend himself, but his throat locks up and no actual words come out. Shelley helps him over to the bed, but sleep is out of the question. Clumps of his hair begin falling out onto the pillow, and his daughter watches him with a mixture of fear and confusion. Shelley hands him a pen and paper, and with violently trembling hands, Blake scrawls out a harrowing message: "I am going to die." The sight breaks Shelley's heart. What she doesn't realize is that Blake can no longer even comprehend her words. The virus has stripped away his ability to understand human speech. Blood begins seeping through his bandages again, and when Shelley peels them back, she recoils. The wound has turned fibrous and mutated. Completely driven by animal instinct, Blake begins licking his own wounds, and his teeth begin falling out one by one. The grim reality sets in. Blake is actively mutating into a wolfman. He mutters a series of guttural, garbled noises that no one can understand. Shelley is utterly devastated, but she refuses to abandon her husband. Catching sight of an old car parked outside the window, she suddenly remembers the ring of keys she found earlier. She sprints down to the basement, grabbing a spare battery and a knife, determined to load Blake up and get him to a hospital in hopes of finding a cure. The wolfman roaming the perimeter is nowhere to be seen, allowing the three of them to quietly slip out and make a break for the vehicle. Shelley shoves Blake and their daughter into the back seat and pops the hood. Just as she feared, the old car's battery is completely dead. She frantically swaps in the fresh battery and cranks the engine. The motor roars to life, sparking a glimmer of hope. But the moment she steps out to disconnect the cables, a horrific, mutated face appears right in front of her. The wolfman had crept up silently from behind, and in a flash, it reaches into the cabin and smashes the car's gear shift to pieces. With the vehicle disabled, they have no choice but to flee on foot. Blake guides his family up onto the roof of a nearby vegetable greenhouse shed, but the wolfman tracks them down instantly. Under the moonlight, the creature's massive, imposing shadow looms over them. Suddenly, a powerful clawed hand tears right through the greenhouse roof. Shelley and their daughter shriek in absolute horror as the beast's grotesque face stares down at them from inches away. As the structure begins to give way and his young daughter slips, Dangling over the edge, Blake realizes he has to make a choice to save his family. He screams at his wife to run back to the house, and without a second thought, dives straight off the roof to draw the monster's attention. A brutal, chaotic brawl erupts in the thick bushes. Clutching her daughter, Shelley bolts back into the cabin, slamming the door shut and locking it tight. After a few agonizing minutes, the sounds of the violent struggle completely vanish. Shelley cautiously peeks through the window and spots a heavily injured, bloody figure standing outside. It's Blake. Without thinking, she throws the door open. Blake collapses onto the floor, gasping frantically for air. His daughter kneels down, gently placing a hand on his head. Even though he can no longer speak, the pure love between them is palpable. But the tender moment is shattered when Blake suddenly coughs up blood, and a pair of long, razor-sharp fangs burst from his gums. Losing all control, he lunges violently at Shelley. But at the absolute last second, a final spark of his humanity forces him to hold back. Knowing he is on the verge of turning completely feral, Blake decides he must banish himself from the house to keep his family safe. But the moment he throws the door open to leave, the alpha wolfman returns, blindsiding Blake and tackling him hard to the ground. Because Blake's transformation isn't fully complete, he is physically outmatched and begins to overpower. Seeing her husband in danger, Shelley sprints outside wielding the knife. The moment the alpha beast turns its attention toward her distraction, Blake seizes the opening, sinking his fangs deep into the monster's throat, refusing to let go until the creature takes its final bloody breath. As Blake raises his head from the corpse, his eyes lock onto a highly distinct, recognizable tattoo branded on the dead monster's arm. A wave of profound shock washes over him. The ruthless monster he just slaughtered was none other than his own missing father. Between the absolute trauma of the realization and the advanced stage of the virus, the last remaining fragments of Blake's humanity evaporate. He sprints blindly into the wilderness as his bones shatter and realign at terrifying speeds. His fingernails elongate into lethal talons, and the mutation seals his fate. He transforms into a full-fledged wolfman. Through his newly mutated eyes, the world shifts into a completely different predatory perspective. Back inside the cabin, Shelley is doing her best to comfort their terrified daughter when the generator suddenly fails, plunging the house into pitch-black darkness. Looking out the window, she catches sight of the fully transformed Blake staring back at her, realizing with absolute heartbreak that the man she loved is gone forever. Suddenly, heavy thudding sounds echo from the roof. Blake is aggressively clawing around, hunting for a way in. Terrified, the mother and daughter sprint through the dark halls, only for Blake to drop down, cutting off their escape. Shelley slashes wildly with her knife, buying just enough time to grab her daughter and duck into a nearby storage room, slamming the heavy door shut. Even with the barrier between them, Blake relentlessly throws his weight against the wood, splintering it. Thinking fast, Shelley spots a heavy steel bear trap on the floor and sets it right in front of the door. A sudden, eerie silence falls over the room. For a moment, it feels like he might have given up and walked away, but Blake had actually managed to slip in through a blind spot. The moment he steps forward, the massive bear trap snaps shut, pinning his leg. Shelley and her daughter use the opening to burst out of the room and flee the house. But the beast Blake has become is completely devoid of human reason. Driven by pure feral rage, he violently tears his own trapped leg off to break free, relentlessly pursuing them through the woods on three limbs. Sprinting for her life, Shelley reaches the site of the RV crash and scrambles inside to retrieve her neighbor's discarded shotgun. Together, they make a desperate run for the old hunting watchtower, knowing it's their only shot at a defensible high ground. But despite his severe injuries, Blake climbs up the structure right after them, bursting through the hatch. Shelley stands there, her hands shaking on the shotgun, utterly paralyzed by the thought of killing her husband. But seeing her mother freeze, the little daughter cries out through her tears, telling her mom that this is exactly what Dad would want for them to finally end his misery. Hearing her daughter's words, Shelley finds her resolve and pulls the trigger, sending a blast right into his chest. Looking down at Blake's dying body, the two collapse into each other's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. As his eyes finally glaze over, Blake mutters one last series of faint, garbled noises, but they can't understand a single word. And on that profoundly tragic note, our story comes to a close.